Tuesday. And I have one going here for our introductions and conclusions. And what I've done is I've used some sample speeches that I have going on right now, or that I had at the beginning of this whole quarantine thing with my LMU students. So introductions and conclusions are the foundation, I like to say, and then the roof to the house that is our speech. We cannot build a proper speech without a solid introduction. And of course, everything in the middle of our speech can get totally destroyed if we do not close and cap back up correctly as well. So we want to make sure that we have these two important elements written in a way that is most effective for informing our audience about what we're speaking about, and also some particular ways that are going to get our audience most interested in listening to a speech that they may have no potential connection to or interest in listening to in the first place. But how are we going to get them so excited? Our introduction, our conclusion allow us the opportunities to do those things, to leave them on a high note, to leave them excited about learning something, to lay out what we're going to speak about, to contextualize information. But ultimately, there are two main functions that I want to go over here. Your introduction has a dual purpose, and although these dual purposes may seem like they are referring to something specific, they in fact can be applied, or this dual purpose can be applied to the whole of an introduction. Your introduction should indicate both the topic and your approach to the explanation of that topic. So in some way, shape, or form, your introduction is going to reveal what the speech is about and how we are going to start talking about that. Ideally, we are going to start at a broad place. So think of the inverted triangle. And we will slowly start to narrow our focus down to the topic that we have come to. And at the end of that introduction, what do we deliver? Well, we usually give that thesis statement where we explain specifically what the approach is. We're going to do this, this, and this, so you better understand the explanation. The other thing that we want to do is we want to arouse our readers' interest. We want to get them excited about what we are going to say. And we want to make them, oftentimes this arousal, this curiosity, this excitement that we can bring to our audience is what we ideally want as we begin. Keeping these two things in mind, we know that, okay, our attention getter is oftentimes the audience interest, and our thesis statement is the revealing of the topic. But note that throughout the different parts of this speech, which there are going to be 4 different parts to the informational introduction, our purpose is going to be to explain the topic and our approach and generate the interest throughout all of these elements. However, and this is a really important thing that I want to make clear, I teach that there are 4 parts to an informative introduction. You will always start with the first, the attention getter, and you will always end that introduction with the thesis statement. The last over here, lay a clear thesis preview of the speech. But everything else in between can very much be mixed and matched and melded together. Rather than thinking of them as 4 unique parts, think of them as one whole that's going to make sure it has these 4 things mentioned within it. You always want to end with a thesis. You always want to start with the attention getter, but how it starts to be written and executed is going to be up to you. Often individuals will think, oh, it's 4 parts. So now I gain the attention. And now I say, here is my topic. And then I say, here is my credibility. And then I say, here is my thesis. But logically, taking those 4 steps may not work for your topic. It may not even do what it needs to do. And in turn, when your introduction is ineffective, the entire speech, like I said, the foundation starts to crumble. So,
Can we talk a minute about the credibility part?
you know it. I'm actually going to go into it in detail.
Okay.
So I will go into that one, but it's something new that we haven't done before. So good. We've done these 3 other parts before, but the credibility with our audience is something that we're going to explicitly add into our speech this time. And I have some easy ways to do it. So I'll give you those in a second. If I don't get to your question about credibility, though, when we get there, you let me know. So y'all, let's think about our first thing that we're going to do. Hopefully during the reading or the extended reading of introductions and conclusions, you were able to see that there are different types of strategies or different ways in which we can start to execute and do our attention getter. This is where we want to get our audience super excited about our speech. Now, before we talked about this attention getter in our introduction speech, and it was simple, and oftentimes asking a one question was enough. How many of you have ever been to? How many of you like to do? But the one-liner in a 5 to 7 minute speech about a more grand topic, something that isn't so narrowed and focused, may be necessary to go beyond the simple question. Also, I want to remind you about a direct question in terms of like online delivery or when there isn't an audience there. Make sure that you're working with that correctly. But again, what is the most important thing? Like, what is the goal of your particular speech? What do you want to inform them about? And then also, who is them? Your audience and your topic are going to determine really what you want to do here for an attention getter. And it's just deciding on what is the purpose and specifically making sure that that purpose is executed within the attention getter. So let's give you some specifics on this rather than giving some definitions. When I say strategically, remember that over here on the left-hand side, start every speech you give with a specific attention getter. So that's why we say specifically. Now, either or strategically. So we can say specific attention getter or a broad general statement, something that will be a good jumping off point for your audience. So when I say specific strategies, these strategies are ones, and we did this in my last class, so I'll just go over here. On the right-hand side, things like jokes, like a story, a question, a fact or statistic. Maybe you use a visual aid. Maybe you use an auto recording of something. This is where we have a specific strategy attached. However, the alternative is if we wanted to instead go with this general broad statement, something that would be large or be a good jumping off point. So think about grand narratives or ideas that the audience already knows about. And this is where you may want to start thinking about like the fundamental beliefs of a society, the fundamental values of your audience, potentially a law that your audience may all be aware of. When I go through the specific examples, this will become a bit more clear. But what is, well, let's go into this third one here. We all know that we want to create a hook here, something that's exciting. But remember that if we do use a broad general statement, that those broad general claims are not persuasive catch-all phrases. I like to warn many of you about this because when we start to talk about our topic in general, it's typically where we get our opinion in there and we start to talk about like how much we love it or we don't love it or what the issues are with it or what the problem or what the greatness or etc. Remember, this is for us to tell us about this topic, not necessarily communicating what we want our audience to believe about the topic. We simply want them to know the information, not believe something is proving to be true. So in the beginning of speeches, for example, where we talk about things like climate change, we can almost like, it's oftentimes like climate change is creating devastating results for our environment. And, by so-and-so year, it is going to be damaged. We must start thinking about it. It's like all of a sudden it becomes a total persuasive speech when you're just going to tell us about like what plastic does. So make sure within that introduction that you're avoiding that persuasive call. And then the final thing is simply to remember that when you're talking about this introduction, you want to make sure that you are going to indicate, at least by the end of that topic, like, or by the end of that attention getter, like what your topic is going to be covering, the general area that you're going to be looking at. Think about attention getter as the joke, and then you have to give the punchline after that joke. Let's see how it starts to fit into the broad area. Individuals oftentimes, if they have a hard time making the connection between the attention getter and the reveal topic, the second part where they in fact let us know what it is, it's more than likely because that attention getter is not broad, or it is not specific to the broad topic, but instead it may be too narrowed and focused and be not representative of the idea, but instead representative of a small specific part of that idea. So if you are looking for something to start us off, remember to make sure that it is representative of the thesis like that you are going to be talking about, that it is relative to like that specific purpose. What is it specifically that you are going to say? Trying to give that away to us. So let me give you some examples. Okay, over here on let's start out on the right-hand side, in fact. So let's see who's here. Natalia, do you want to help me out real quick? Are you there?
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, could you go ahead and read me the first imagine?
Yes. Okay. Imagine not being able to take a shower, eating just barely enough food to survive, if that, all while being tightly packed into the last few parts of the world still habitable.
Okay. So what did we talk about last week in terms of hypothetical statements to start? Do you remember, Natalia?
To kind of make it like relatable.
Sure, absolutely. Because right now, have you ever had this situation?
No.
Okay, so I mean, maybe we're getting into it, maybe we're not. I don't know. But what do you think this speech is about by just reading that first paragraph? What do you think it's going to be about?
Kind of like how to survive.
Okay, now let's go into the next one. Will you read that one for me?
Yeah. It sounds like a story straight out of a dystopian future novel, but in reality, this could easily be in the future.
Okay, so now what do you think this speech is about? Anything different?
I'm not really sure.
Okay. Well, then the individual goes on to the next part. That was the attention getter. And here's where we're gonna, I guess, let us know. It says, hello, I am. And today I will be informing you all about climate change's impact on low-income persons. What happened here, Natalia?
So they started with like a situation that not really everyone could relate to.
Okay.
And then it went into like this could be a real thing that could happen to all of us. And then they introduced what their specific topic is, what is going to be.
Totally. So in the grand scheme of it all, sure, technically they have the things, right? There's an attention getter. There's this revealed topic about what specifically they're going to talk about. I guess they told us that something's going on, but we very much miss the entire first part of this attention getter because we don't have what type of context to put it in, because the idea about climate change and the situation that they've said to imagine could be, in fact, like so many different things, right?
Yeah.
Also, what are you really confused on at this point? This could be anybody's situation in climate change, right?
Mhm.
So when you get to this last part, when they specifically tell you what happens, you start to think, why in the world are they talking about climate change? And then beyond, oh, this is about climate change. And specifically what?
How it impacts you or impacts low income persons.
Right. Did you hear anything about that at the beginning?
No.
No, absolutely not, because that could be about anyone. So the connection, the disconnect here is very confusing. Sure, we have an attention getter and we have like what this speech is going to be about, but alas, nothing really makes logical sense for the audience. It needs to be connected. So good, 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 good. All right, let's look at the next one. Kennedy, you want to play along? So let's
Yeah.
read, let's read the first one here, the United States. This one is now going to be a general introduction. So go ahead.
The United States prides itself on its democratic history and its ability to provide free and fair elections to all voters, emphasizing the significance of voting as both a freedom and a responsibility of Americans to participate in the country's decisions about its leaders and policies.
Perfect. So here we have a broad statement about who or where.
Americans and voters.
Right. So if you had to read this first part of this statement, what do you think this speech is going to be about?
About their choice to vote.
Okay, good. Choice of vote. So good. In general, at least we're on the right track. Hopefully each of you are saying about how this general statement, they're going to contextualize what voting is in the sense of like American culture. But Kenny, when you go on to read the next one, let's see what it says.
Similarly, in the classroom, students are taught the importance of elections and the right to vote in courses like social studies and the U.S. history.
So now we've gone to the broad general, like idea of general value that we're continuously taught as just being, American citizens. And then specifically, how does it start to narrow?
It narrows on to the students.
Okay, students and how they are also taught this information, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So now let's read the last one.
With the cultivation and normalization of elections and voting in the upbringing of everyday Americans, why don't more Americans vote?
So what do you think this speech is going to be about?
The U.S. like pushes for people to vote every day, and they're talking about like, even though they're pushing that hard, why are the numbers still kind of low and people aren't voting like they're supposed to be doing?
Absolutely. Fantastic. So really the same idea you had at the beginning of the speech or of the introduction at the attention getter was the same thing that we really got to when they like came to this end, right?
Mm-hmm.
We assume that with this question, the answer is going to come that that's what they're going to respond to.
Right.
So here, I want to encourage each of you, especially to not worry so much about these specific types of attention getters. They are fantastic to use when you have something like a story or a theme that you could possibly take throughout your speech. Rhetorical questions that we can perhaps ponder, or guided questions, if you will, stacked questions. Those that you learned about potentially within your reading could be useful. But I really want to encourage all of you that if you have a topic that is historical, we really need to understand what happened maybe before that, or what's going on today, that we need to understand what that had to do with anything, right, in the past. So you're going to want to do something like that. But then also, if any of you have a speech that is potentially one discipline specific or career specific, industry specific, you may need to take the time as your attention getter to contextualize that, like about what it is, the entity itself, the value statement, the reason for it. Remember that also things like chronological organization does not have to be for the entire speech, but it could also be very easily to organize your thoughts in your introduction. If you wanted to take a case from the past to where you are now, and that's where we're going to go from here, we could do something like that. So consider how the general or the specific, but the key things that we want to remember are that they in fact start with those general or specific, that there is going to be a link, that we will see the connection and the relation to the topic. That if we are using general claims, that we do not make them persuasive, and that regardless, that at the some point we have seen weaved in how your specific area of focus is going to come about. So the next step is where we do in fact reveal the topic. So you may be thinking, oh, well, didn't I just do that, Amanda? Well, yes, it revealed like the general topic, but now like specifically, what do we want to go into? What are we going to narrow our focus down to? The revealed topic portion you did in your last speech. It was one of those where you gave like your name or your age or maybe where you grew up. You are more than welcome to tell us your name again, but you do not need to. It can oftentimes create a disruption to the flow of the attention getter. And by the end, I'm going to try to show you an example of how that goes. But I would not include your name at this point. If we were in the class, you would not be doing it. If you are speaking in an outside experience, you do not need to say it. However, if you have not been introduced and you are not in the classroom and we don't know that, yes, in this case, this would be a fine place for you to go ahead and throw your name into everything as well. But the other part about this is that we want to provide information as to why the background may be important, or how can we start to contextualize our speech topic. So what is the topic and why is it important? Those are two key parts of this, this information to add to the introduction. So what's the background information on the topic? Why or what that topic is, and then why it's important. Now, if you watched or if you read through the other reading on introductions, you were made clear that if you didn't make in your attention getter it clear to your audience why this topic was important or how it relates to your audience, then you must explicitly do so. And the reveal topic portion where you provide background and context is a very easy way to do that. So when I say the importance of a topic, remember, an importance can be things like its relevance in society. It doesn't have to be it's important because it's bad or because it's harmful or we need to do something about it right away. It can also be important because it has this many individuals following it, or because this many people participate in the world, and wouldn't it be good to know just about that, or this is an everyday practice, or this is a growing thing, and we can give and provide numbers with that. So we can make clear its relevance in society. But if our audience maybe doesn't know what that relevance is, it's going to be your job to take their hand and show them directly how it can, in fact, apply to them. So remember, to whom are you speaking? Who is your audience? I know at the beginning of this writing, we talked about making your audience your class. And you are more than welcome to still keep your audience as your class. However, I also want to encourage you that if it becomes a little bit easier for you because your speech is specific to a career path or a discipline, that if you wanted to talk to individuals within that industry, that's fine as well. You are more than welcome to get as creative as possible. I'm going to say that when I did an international public speaking class one time at Santa Monica College, and I had a student from Singapore, and she was so she did her speech on Singapore, but how she framed it was that us as the class were part of a flight that was getting ready to land in Singapore. So she talked to us as if she was the flight attendant. So it was like, passengers arriving here in Singapore, welcome. As we get ready to land, I'm going to give you a little bit of information, you know, as somebody who's lived in as a native for so many years, blah, blah, blah. So the individual was able to provide context in that way. There's also, I talk about this when we speak of in the visual aids lecture as well, but I had a student once at Moorpark College who did a model of Alcatraz because that was a project that she had done in another class. And in turn, she used it and she talked to all of us as if we were prisoners arriving at Alcatraz, and she was like the guard. So the way that she guided us through in the beginning set us up for not only who we were and what we needed to know about, but then she was able to utilize some fun transitions in between as well. Things like, all right, inmates, we're on our way to, like, you know, to see where you're living for the next years or something like that. So it was a really cute and creative way to do so. But what you really want to do is put your topic in context and supply a backdrop to give us perspective on it. What is happening right now and what's going on and what's the relevance or importance of the topic. So like I said, if you don't establish the importance in your attention getter using some kind of statistic or piece of information that shows its relevance to society, remember, you can always make the connection directly for your audience. Why do you think as a college student one would be interested in this? If they're not interested in it right now, what could be the potential in the future that you would want them to hold on to that knowledge or information of? Or, you know, that although we may not know about it now, with its rise in importance, like, you know, it's something for us to keep in the foremost of our minds as citizens, something like that. So ideally, you should discuss the area in which your topic fits. And that's the important thing, is that here we are going to want to give a general overview from where that attention getter was, but we are going to slowly start to narrow our focus to specifically what we are talking about. Remember to make sure that you are giving any historical, political, social understanding of the topic if necessary, and then always, or try to communicate the relevance and the importance of examining the topic and being a part of the larger discussion as it impacts us all. So really trying to forge the connection between your audience, either as college students, as men and, as men in the audience, as, whoever, however you want to target it and shape it. So let's go ahead and look here at the reveal. And on this time, I'm going to have us look at the left first, because if you are seeing on the left side with the I will be informing you about, this was where we left off in the last part over here. So what we have for the reveal topic, so let's see, Francis, do you want to help?
Hi, sure.
Sure. Hey. Okay, will you read this one for me?
I will be informing you all about climate change's impacts on low-income persons. Do I read the next one?
And then, yeah, let's go into the next one.
Climate change is defined as a change in the climate, the average weather conditions in a region or globally.
Right. So it's an interesting, again, way that this started to come about. What did we notice about this first part, right? I'll be informing you all about climate change's impact on low-income persons, which we already know, okay. But what did the individual put after?
It says that she left.
Oh, no. Oh, hold on, she's coming back.
Oh, there she is.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Francis?
Oh, hi. Sorry.
Hi, no, I know that. Yes, okay. Welcome back. Glad to see you. So what happens here with the second part? What do you think? They go on and they give a what?
Like they explain what climate change is.
Sure. Okay. So now, but do you get what is this climate change? It's defined as change in the climate. Okay, well, now that's just redundant, right? The
Yeah.
average weather conditions in a region or globally. Is there anything specific about climate change they're going to talk about? Do we know?
It sounds like more general, like they're saying like a more general explanation of what it is, but they're not really going into it.
Absolutely. Remember that from our attention getter, this individual set us up with this imagined situation. Seems like a dystopian future. Hello, and I'm going to inform you all about climate change's impact on low-income person. And we realized that the top here was simply about climate change, right? It didn't have anything to do with low-income people. It was very confusing. So then I thought, okay, well, maybe in the revealed topic, we'll narrow the focus. But this individual goes on to simply give what afterwards? Like you said, a general definition. In this case, great, I do want to know about climate change, but ideally the key here is how it's going to impact. We know what climate change is. We want to know about climate change in these individuals. So this would have been an opportunity if we wanted to give some background or kind of give some detail or historical, political, social context. If we didn't do that as our attention getter, this would have been the place for us to do so. Now they could have narrowed down the focus about how that climate change specifically is addressing low-income individuals and then arrive at a thesis. Does that make a little bit more sense? I'm gonna go with maybe. Okay.
Yes.
Cool. Okay, Taylor, you want to read this one for us? That with the cultivations. This is the one for the last that we read. So if you remember, we left off over here with the cultivation and normalization of elections and voting and the upbringing of everyday Americans. Why don't more Americans vote? So now let's see how it added on. I put there, why don't more Americans vote? She follows up with, so.
With the cultivation and normalization of elections and voting in the upbringing of everyday Americans, why don't more Americans vote? With the amount of eligible voters, why is voter turnout so low? Why is voter turnout even lower in minority communities, specifically in the Asian American communities?
Now, so what are we looking at now with this piece of information? What have we arrived at, or how did the individual start to narrow their focus? Did they do it with background information or contextualizing or details?
I think it contextualized like voting as a whole in like America and just like regular social trends, and then it kind of narrowed it down to like us right now and social trends currently about voting.
Mm-hmm. But like, how did they do that? Did they give you any information about those social trends or voting?
They focused it on minorities.
Yeah.
Did they tell you anything about those minorities?
They said specifically in the Asian community.
Yeah, well, let me go back here. They did not tell you anything. They simply asked you a set of rhetorical questions.
Kind of just threw it all in there.
They just asked you a bunch of questions, right? Why don't more Americans vote? That was where we started. And then they drew us with 3 more questions. With the amount of eligible voters, why is voter turnout so low? Why is voter turnout even lower in minority communities, especially or specifically the Asian American communities? Now that we see what that topic is about, if we go back, Kennedy, to the attention getter, can we start to see a disconnect in any way?
Yeah. I mean, to an extent, because he's still talking about why our vote's low, but he didn't mention that he was going to talk about specifically the Asian community.
Absolutely. And in a 5 to 7 minute speech, we need to get there as quick as possible. Taking all that time at the beginning to establish voting in your introduction and then getting to the point where it's about Asian Americans, it's a bit of, it's a kind of a lost cause. We also are like, oh, I didn't think this speech was about that at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. I'm so glad that y'all see those ones. Now, So making sure that you reveal the topic, you let us know specifically what this topic's going to be about, and try to put that in some context, give us some background. What's the need? What is our like sense of urgency to like know about this topic? Where do we sit with it? Like we were saying, give numbers, give examples, give stories, talk about it in relation to your audience. And then the thing that you need to do is give a credibility statement. Now, I'm not saying that that's the next step. I'm simply saying that needs to be a part of the introduction. And if you remember reading from Aristotle and the ethos reading of last week, we got into the idea of credibility having two different pieces of, or two different parts to it. In order for somebody to be deemed as credible, they have to contain both competence and character. Competence and character are so much fun to look at, specifically with elections and what's going on. Every day, competence and character is an amazing thing to examine in the press conferences that Donald Trump gives. It's really pretty amazing to watch how this is done. Elections are won oftentimes on competence and character alone. It's crazy, but what I want each of you to note is that oftentimes in public speaking events, if you were to ever go to an event, if they had a keynote speaker come into your classroom, if somebody brought in, or if you were at a work event and they had a speaker, you were watching a TED Talk, there would be some kind of introduction of the speaker. There would be something that would introduce this individual so that by the time they got ready to start speaking to you, there would be no outstanding reservations about that person being capable and also being having their intentions be for the good of the audience. So credibility contains both competence and character. Competence we can see as and let me just go forward. So competence on the left, character on the right here. Competence is the audience's perception of whether or not a speaker is credible to speak on a given topic. Each of you already know that you are credible because you've been doing the work and doing the research and you've been going through details, making sure that you're finding information that's correct, relevant, reliable, viable. But your audience doesn't know that. And in the grand scheme of life, oftentimes your audience is never going to know your, in fact, competence. So the competence is one thing that we are going to be needing to develop throughout the introduction, and you are in fact going to be delivering this competence implicitly throughout the entirety of your speech. But explicitly, we are going to need for you to communicate your competence and character in your introduction. Like I said, somebody's usually going to come and give you an introduction. They're going to give you an introduction that communicates your competence, what your degree maybe was in, what your expertise is on the topic. And they'll, talk about the work that you've been doing and why you're doing it and what you've been working on and working towards and your goals and whatever. But because you don't have somebody to do that, you have to lay that out on your own. I want to also make clear that individuals oftentimes, even without having somebody deliver their character and their competence to build credibility, that they already may have an outstanding character that influences them already. So if you think about in your classes when you've seen presentations by maybe like a student who continuously was not prepared, the information that they were delivering became more of a waste of people's time, that the next time that they get up and speak, their competence is already diminished as well as their character. Like, oh, this individual's like this goodwill that they have towards their audience. If you're doing this for my best interests, then don't waste my time, And also competence, like if you're not going to prepare, if you're not going to be delivering it in a way that I can understand, it's going to demean that competence. So people can already have that idea. And that idea can oftentimes influence the way in which we hear the message. So continue to also think about how that can also have a positive effect. Individuals of whom you maybe know their name, but you don't in fact know of like their knowledge of a particular thing. You may be interested in going to see them just because of who they are. Ooh, I want to go hear them talk. And then you end up getting a message on behalf of it. Remember that ethos is oftentimes also looked at in terms of persuasion, competence, and character. And from what I was just telling you, we can see how during things like potentially an election. So like, let's say like we know somebody named, Donald Trump, he's going to come on the TV. Your preconceived notion of his competence and character is going to influence the way in which you see him and what you're going to be persuaded by. So that competence and character, your integrity is really important beyond the class, and then also how you establish it here. The first way that you can communicate your competence is simply by that of what you know. So we will usually look at it as like, oh, a certificate, a degree, a award. So or you're working in the area. However, many of you have that particular competence and that expertise because you've been doing it or working with it or experiencing it for a long time. You can, of course, utilize that. Many of you have maybe just taken on your topic with competence because it's something that you've done your whole life, that you've practiced, that you're a real avid player for, and that's enough too. But that isn't also different than maybe the person sitting next to you. So if it isn't necessarily like a expertise of a degree or a certification, try to take it one step beyond simply saying that you engage in it or you enjoy it, but also that you have spent some time researching it. That research component can show that you have delved into the work to examine what specifically this topic has to offer. What types of credible information have you looked at? And I don't need you to like lay out your sources, but if that would be a great way to imply your credibility, you could do so as well. But simply by saying something explicitly like, by extensively researching the blank, that's my topic, over the past 3 weeks, I've come to not only dive into testimonies and stories of days past, but able to listen to some podcasts and interviews from the present day. Something to that extent. Or just saying I've done extensive research on the topic, guess what? That's also enough. The other thing that you're going to want to enforce is your character. Character, we often will also think of with persuasion. Why is a person giving this speech? Especially if we are urging somebody to take action or do something. For example, as simple as give me money. That will very often lead into this idea of like, well, why? What's your intention? Why are you doing this? And so with persuasion, we will oftentimes urge the audience to take action, and we will want to establish that we want them to be doing this because we are looking out for their good. The same thing that we can do in informative speaking, where we establish like, why are we to trust? What is our motivation behind exploring this issue or this audience? It is very important here also with character that if you are talking about a group that you are not a member of and you are representing that information to us, that you express the intention of communicating on behalf of or about those individuals. So for example, there's a man, his name is Tim Wise. He's a huge advocate on issues of racism and white privilege. He is a white man, and he is a white man who comes out, and one of the first things he establishes within every speech is this idea of character, he uses his place of agency to speak about the things that individuals will not oftentimes listen to coming out of the mouth of a person of color. And so he starts to establish his character, his intent, and his purpose in speaking about this. It can develop a lovely relationship with the audience. But for each of you in informative speaking, remember that even if it's something that you have a connection to, a personal connection to, something that drives you, something that you've been excited about learning more about, use that here. Tell us what the good of this speech is, and not that it's good to listen to it or whatever, but that it has a purpose or an intention that's going to benefit, that will in fact give you knowledge, that will give you information, that will impart a unique understanding of an experience, of a culture, of whatever. So whatever your goal is or that purpose, we can always identify it with our intention toward our audience, that I'm doing this for you all, and also with the group addressed. And we will typically get that through also you expressing why this is important to them. That is a wonderful piece of character that you can show when you make those direct links to your audience. So remember our two examples. We have this credibility over here, and I'm going to talk about them just in the interest of time. I'll say I personally have been intertwined with climate change since my early childhood through my and my family's involvement in volunteer groups focusing on environmental health and my recent research into climate change for this speech. So the competence sure is stated that they've been working with family since early childhood. So I guess that's a long period of time. We can be specific, and that would be helpful. Also, the idea of my family's involvement in volunteer groups. I would want to hear something there. What would you all want to hear?
What involvement they had in the different groups, or what were the different groups' names? Like, do I know any of them? Can I know that they're credible? Like something that I can relate to? Because you could say like, you've been doing missionary work, or you've been volunteering, and I'm like, okay, so was it like more church driven? Was it more like Save the Earth, like green? Like which way was it?
And wouldn't this be, Corey, a great way for them to maybe talk about, oh, I don't know, the low income, right? Like, so this would be a perfect way. Okay, we still haven't gotten it, but now if we even talked about, like, now we can start to see. This would have been an excellent opportunity to be like, yes, through the mission trips that I took every year to wherever, I was able to start to see in this area, blah, blah, blah. The concern for these individuals and their humanity led me to do more research over the last 3 weeks, and I'd like to inform you about these conditions that they live in, right? So we could do something in that case. So very good, very smart. And the next one, as a first-time Asian voter, as well as a member of the Asian American community, I have become interested in exploring the social context behind the subject of low political participation, especially low voter turnout. For the past few weeks, I've researched extensively about the issue. So what is her like credibility? She said she researched extensively, I guess. And then, but with the competence, the research, but what's the character?
She's a member of the community that we're talking about. So like her own personal experiences would be some of her credibility. Is that like what it would be?
I would say, sure. Where is her like intention for the audience or the good? I think the idea, I like the idea that first time American voter, sure, that'll add her to the mix. She's interested in exploring, but why? Right? Like, why is she concerned about the like low voter turnout? What would that be important to her as a first time voter? Those two things were interesting. So again, she hits the marks on it, but is it effective? Not really. A great way would be to talk about as she gets ready to vote, maybe in this election, and I only know because we talked about it in generating this topic idea, her frustration with seeing one Asian American represented on the political platform for our presidency, and how that has not even like come into place before. So that would have been a great way for her to start talking about, like, with the absence of representation and the absence of Asian Americans within the political sphere. I was fascinated to see why, how that correlates with individuals not voting, because for me, I'm getting ready and I can't wait, something like that. So however you can start to build in that credibility and competence, after taking a class, I gained much insight and information. It made me want to search out more. And I hope today, after my extensive research, to provide each of you with details and knowledge that will fuel your understanding of said topic. would be a simple way to do it. You can read the sample example as well in your outlining example, but the last thing that I want to share with you here is the clear thesis statement. So remember, the last thing that you do need to give is a thesis statement, and that is the last part. But each of you have your thesis statement already. Do not cut and paste that into your introduction. Instead, you may also want to restructure how you communicate that thesis, ensuring that the purpose is the same. But if you see on the third line where it says, for example, you would not say, to inform my audience about introductions. That wouldn't sound right because our audience is right there. So instead, you may want to make it seamless within whatever you previously just stated and say, by the end of the speech, I hope each of you will gain a comprehensive understanding about the main functions of introductions. After I discuss the attention getter, topic reveal, credibility statement, and thesis. No need to say the to inform. So we can go with a simple, like, in order to, and you don't even have to say in order to, but today for each of you to become more knowledgeable. By the end of the speech, I hope each of you will be better aware of, however you want to lay those out. So you have in your introduction 4 things that you need to get in, which would be gaining our interest and attention and revealing our topic, and then also revealing your credibility and giving a thesis statement. But the amount of information and other detail that you need to provide to us within that, it is grand. And it also needs to make sure that it is reflective of the topic it is speaking about, that is contextualizing what we need to know before we get into the body of the speech. And remember, you do not want to use any specific examples or details in the introduction that you are going to be giving in the body of the speech. Save that for the body of the speech. Do not make it redundant in any way. As for the delivery just of your thesis, a very important rhetorical strategy will be to deliver that to your audience. You want to deliver the first couple lines of your introduction always to your audience, meaning I am looking into the camera, I am looking at them. Even if it is a quotation, it is best to memorize it at that time, because the first thing you want to establish with your audience is a solid sound credibility, and to deliver and fluidly be able to communicate what you are talking about, even those first sentences, can give that great first impression. The other thing is that for your thesis, do not read that. It's what your speech is about. So if you have to look down at that point and say, today I'm going to tell you about, you're like, are you? So make sure that you are practicing delivering that to us without having to read it as well. There are many different aspects to, of course, your conclusion as well in this speech. But like we are, shockingly, we are running a little bit over. I am more than welcome to have any of you who wanted stick around, and I'll go over the conclusion for a little bit if you want. But before that, just in case, I want to let anybody know who's going to be leaving that on Tuesday, I will be making a small, we'll do a small Zoom lecture, kind of a hodgepodge of information. Come in with any last questions. I'll go over some reminders of how to execute particular parts of your information. Also, how to do your peer evaluations, how to upload your speech if you need to. So if you are planning on doing and uploading your speech before then, let me know so that I can give you that information. Otherwise, it's all in Canvas. I feel like you can very easily walk yourself, through it, and you can very much self-direct your guidance. So if you have yet to sign up for a speech delivery date, make sure you do so as soon as possible. I'm going to go in and add some extra spaces for your class today. And then I will also put up that visual aid handout just to make sure that it is up there. And that one sheet you should be able to read and get it in general. You are also, of course, more than, oh, I know, Dylan Rose. You want to say hi, Dylan? Okay, there she goes. Okay. She's there. What did I say? Yeah, I think that's it. Anybody have any last minute ideas or thoughts before I like fake end and then I'll start a new recording for just the conclusion part?
So will the slides be on Canvas so we could go over them ourselves?
These ones are the conclusion ones?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to, it's actually just a handout, that one. I didn't even put it up into a slide. So I'm going to simply go over the handout, but it'll be there. I'll put that as well as the handout that this PowerPoint was made out of that we just went over.
Okay, just because I have a class like at 11:15, so I'll stay.
Oh yeah, do
Prep
whatever you
report
got
card.
to do. Absolutely, totally. It'll be up there for sure. Okay, whoever wants to stay fantastic, I am going to stop my, no,
Sir, for the visual aid, since we're doing it on Zoom, are we just going to hold up like a pic or our visual aid to the camera?
you're actually going to show it to
Okay.
the camera. So just as I share my screen,
Mm-hmm.
you all will have the ability to do so as well. So down there at the bottom, do you have a share screen button?
I think I've seen it before, actually.
Okay. We will, on the day of the speeches, we'll have our own like Zoom area. Each person who is designated to give their speech live will be a co-host of that meeting, so that they can share their visual aids and speak when necessary. If you are recording your own speech, though, you can stand, and then just as we would do in the classroom, we'll walk over to the podium, push the button, reveal the thing, talk about it, and then, but for us, it'll just simply come up on our screen.
Okay.
And in talking, yeah, so we'll talk a little bit more. I'll give you the highlights of those visual aids as we go forward, but the key thing about visual aid, it is, think of it like a supporting material. It's something that is going to help explain or clarify what you are already talking about. So having something that you need to like put up in the background or just like a picture of something like stock footage wouldn't necessarily make sense. So simply try to have something that can support or like something that supplements it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. You're welcome. All right, how do I stop this? I don't even know how to, escape. Escape. See Zoom meeting. I stop recording? All right, well, I don't know how to stop recording, y'all. All right, I'm going to put this one up here. Here is the handout, or it's content. It'll be put right there into your Canvas page. The conclusion is going to be 3 different steps, just as it was in your introduction speech. So drawing to a close, like that idea of an in conclusion, or to close, or to bring everything together today. So try to illustrate with a signpost or a transitional phrase there that lets us know we're drawing to a close. But the key part about a conclusion is not running off the stage or getting done with your speech as fast as you can. When individuals often will say, so to close, at that point, they'll start throwing away the message, like they're trying to rush off and get done as quickly as possible. We want to make sure that you have a dynamic conclusion, an effective conclusion, one that really solidifies what you were talking about, that makes a lasting impression on the topic, that you're like, wow, I want to learn more about that, and also leaves a good impression with the speaker, like that individual knew what they were talking about, and I was in fact informed of that. How are we going to do that? We'll do that through our 3 parts, but I'm also going to give you some tips about what to include within those parts so that it can make a little bit more sense to you. You are going to use first the opportunity to signal the end of the speech. So summarize and drawing this to a close. You are not going to want to repeat our main points word for word. You may want to instead like paraphrase them. You can give like the key themes or the arguments that you've presented. And I'm only saying that because oftentimes individuals will feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to simply cut and paste my thesis again. It doesn't mean that you can't simply cut and paste your thesis again. I'm saying try to rephrase it in a different way so it isn't seemingly redundant over time. And that builds upon the next step because we want to, in fact, repeat our thesis, but it's saying here, we want to recapture the essence of our speech by summarizing that thesis. But we don't want to necessarily just repeat the words. Instead, try to do a mini summary of that main point. Take it one step further. What key idea, what interesting statistic, what overall understanding maybe did we come to with that introduction, or sorry, with that information that we heard over time? So if we were thinking about something, and it says see the sample, but I'm going to go ahead and give you one. So if I was saying, you know, with climate change, I don't even know where I could even, because we're using this climate change one, or, so if I would draw into a close, today I was able to provide you with information about how climate change is impacting low-income individuals. We looked a little bit about how low-income individuals' air quality and in turn their lung health is being impacted. We also looked at how water is being impacted and the high levels of lead that are leading to birth defects and even death. And we finally examined, right? So you can give some of those high parts of the speech or those key components that you'd like your audience to go away with. Repetition is a very impactful rhetorical strategy because if you hear it enough said, it oftentimes will be the thing that you go away with. You can do that with little phrases, and we'll talk about that with persuasion, but even so with repetition of the same reinforced belief or value, or again, in this case, example or statistic. So, remember, like it's saying, you know, paraphrasing versus repeating. I feel like I've already talked about that. And then the last thing that you want to do is you want to draw to a close to connect. Now, before I was always talking about like, did we go back to the introduction? Have I gone back to that attention getter? However we choose to close or whatever we started with, I want to make sure that if you can't relate it specifically back to the attention getter, let's say you started with a story and now you want to like resolve the story at the end, or you gave a, you know, now we're landing and coming in for a landing. I hope you enjoy your time here, something like that. Is there a general idea or a value or a belief that was stated in your attention getter? Feel free to use that same kind of way to close out the speech, to pull it into a bow, to draw it back home, to let us see that this is all how it's come together and ended. So like I said, if you can't draw back to that attention getter specifically, make sure that it is simply a device that reinforces the importance or the understanding of the topic in context of like injustice, or maybe in society or in the world. Read through the different types of devices. You can, of course, look at these different devices within the reading as well. But when I go on to these mistakes to avoid, I think it's going to help you to understand what devices we're looking at. So the first thing that I want you to avoid, or try to make this, by not doing these specific things, you will more than likely create an effective conclusion. You want to make sure that you don't ramble out. So people, like I said, will oftentimes get to this part of the speech and think that it's time for them to go off on a tangent about the world and the future and hope and what it's looking like. That's what we do in a paper, or what you do in a research paper. In a speech, when you say to close or in conclusion, you are really just drawn to a close. Your 5 to 7 minute speech should be, this conclusion should be no more than 5 to 10% of the speech. That means like maybe 45 seconds should the conclusion be, because you'd never want to say, so to close, and then keep going on and on and on. There's nothing worse than that. And I know that you feel that same way, like when your instructors say, okay, well, we're almost done. And then it's like 30 minutes later. So making sure that you are not rambling on and going for a short and concise conclusion is always better. The other thing, you don't want to end abruptly. Make sure, and so some of us during our introduction speech didn't properly close out the speech, having a proper conclusion. Think of it as its own paragraph, its own point. Making sure that you're not ending abruptly. So take the time to end that speech in a proper way. Don't like walk off as we're speaking, or start walking to the camera to turn it off while you're like finishing it. Oftentimes people let their volume drain out, unless that's a rhetorical choice, like I'm saying. You also don't want to end with, well, that's it, or I guess that's pretty much it, because that has a very awkward ending as well. It makes it seem like you weren't prepared, like you didn't know how it was going to end, that you didn't really care about how to wrap it up for your audience. Statements like that detract from your credibility and your preparedness. Making sure that you simply end this speech with a significant statement that both vocally and content-wise is communicating to your audience, I am done. I say here, and this is a general guideline that is oftentimes hard for individuals, to not say thank you as your final words. Try to set a goal to avoid the word thank you. And this is a strategy, or by not saying thank you, it is going to force you to come up with a way to end that your audience knows simply from the content and from hearing it, from seeing it in your face, from seeing it in your body. When your final words have been stated, it should be clear to everyone that you have ended. Have you all ever so remember, when we write or when we read sentences, the intonation in the English language typically is like a da 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 da, and we end going down. The reason that you would end on a higher, tone, would be only if I had a particular punctuation mark. And that punctuation mark would be like, because it's like, I am happy to, or I am going to the store today. Now it's a declaration, it's a statement, you know that that's over. But my voice would go up if I said, I'm going to the store today, right? Oh, thank you, Natalia. You have a great day too. Do we see the two differences in the statement? The content is the same. The way it is communicated and the way it is stated is different because one is stated as a question and one is stated as a declaration. You want to end your speech with a declaration unless it is a strategy that you want to question the audience to end. I say this because one way that we vocally communicate to end is to avoid a concept called uptalk. And I spoke with some of you, or at least wrote in your feedback of your introduction speech, to consider the uptalk. This document will have a link to an example of uptalk, but it would be something like, what it does is it asks us for, it poses that you are utilizing more so of a question rather than some kind of statement. And what that makes you look is unsure of yourself. It makes your audience unsure if you're ending or not, right? It's almost like that type of idea. Here is my example here.
My name is Allison Shapira, and I teach public speaking and presentation skills. I'm going to give you an example of uptalk, when our voice goes up at the end of a sentence, followed by what I like to call straight talk, when our voice follows a conversational arch and ends naturally. So here's an example of uptalk, which I hear a lot at conferences when people introduce themselves. My name is Allison Shapira, and I'm the president of Global Public Speaking. It sounds like a question. Like I'm not really sure that that's my name, more that I have a right to be speaking to you. Now here's an example of straight talk. My name is Allison Shapira, and I'm the president of Global Public Speaking. Do you hear the difference? Allison Shapira, Allison Shapira. In the second example, my voice sounds more confident and more authoritative, which make me more credible as a speaker. So as you're speaking.
All right. I talk a lot about vocal uptake, or this vocal fry, in my gender communication class, specifically with women quite often in business. It is one of the tells, or one of those reinforced unconscious biases that individuals are able to put forward when listening to a person's voice. And because if a woman most often is doing it and asking a question, it's almost like having the tags on the end like I do. Does that make sense? Is everybody understanding what I'm talking about? Right? Or you end it with a right, like a question that you're uncertain. That can happen at the end of a speech oftentimes. And then when it does, it simply starts to create a disconnect and that lack of credibility for our audience. So I say don't say thank you because it forces you to do that. But I also say don't say thank you. You can always be gracious and you can be considerate and you can give a smile and a nod. But also maybe nobody is applauding. Only thank them in the case of like applause if you would like to. So you can thank them for those like particular applause. But to say thank you to end the speech is weird because you're not necessarily saying thank you for anything. And I mean, I get it that they're like listening to you, but you're also providing with them with something too. Delivery can, of course, assist in communicating the final moments of your speech, and that is going to be important. What tone or what feeling do we want to be left with? Remember, your vocal variety can very much communicate what we should be feeling at the end of our speech. Are we ending it up? Are we ending it on a lower note? Our tone, our pacing, and our rhythm can build the momentum of our conclusion. And there are typically two different styles of this, that your speech will either work to conclude as it'll say here, a crescendo ending. So a crescendo ending is one that builds with the zenith of power. It just continues to build and build and build. It's a combination of vocal and pitch and a choice of words, and usually like a dramatic content, gestures. The type of crescendo ending, in like the most extreme, you would know it as like what a coach would do at the end of a game, like really getting people motivated and all riled up and excited. Like, so we'll get out there and we'll go and do something. This is my, did I show you this crescendo example? Oops, sorry, y'all.
We chose Georgia Tech because we want to do the impossible. And this school is equipped.
Sorry, y'all. Totally nailing screen sharing today.
We chose
Look at this
Georgia
guy.
Tech because we want to do the impossible. And this school is equipped with the resources and faculty to help us do just that. And so, in the words of Sir Isaac Newton, if I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. Georgia Tech is proud of its many traditions, but the one I find most exciting is our tradition of excellence. Our mission as students is not to follow in the footsteps of the astronauts, Nobel Prize laureates, and presidents who graduated before us, but to exceed their footsteps, crush the shoulders of the giants upon whom we stand. We here are all such innovative people, so I am telling you, if you want to change the world, you're at Georgia Tech. You can do that. If you want to build the Iron Man suit, you're at Georgia Tech. You can do that. If you want to play theme music during your convocation speech like a badass, we're at Georgia Tech. We can do that. I am doing that.
I have to take note, y'all. If you see this guy over on the right-hand side of your corner, the guy who's cheering, because if you see at the beginning of this speech, it's hysterical. Look at this face. This guy, right? And then by the end, he's like, yeah, like everybody's cheering. He's cheering, everybody's so excited. It's hysterical because, I mean, and it works. He did music with it, he built it, but it builds to a zenith. So typically, if we have a positive speech, if we have one of hope, if we have one where we're motivating our audience, if we have something that is lighter, has lifted us, a crescendo ending can work. It's where it simply builds up. Whereby a dissolved ending is a different type of speech or a different type of ending. And oh, yes, I know. Yeah, we do need to do your school, but give me 1 second, my sweet. I just need to bring this back in real quick. One last thing. Hold on. Okay. So the last thing that we want, just to simply make sure of, is a dissolve ending. That's where you would take it step by step, and it would typically go on like an emotional connection. So it fades step by step, dissolving. So something like, if you had a beginning, think back to little Timmy. Think back on how now he won't see prom. He won't do blank, right? So you take it on a step and, oh, now what are we going to do? So the other last thing that I want to make sure of, these last 2 points, make sure that you aren't introducing any new points or support. And then make sure that your conclusion isn't drastically different. Simply letting us know that we want to make sure that if it was a completely emotional speech, we don't want to end with humor. It would be awkward or just ruining that tone and how we leave. I must, however, say that these, ouch. But in the key notes of the grand scheme of things, like let's say it's a lighter, less high stakes environment, it may be even better for us to, like, if you did a very touching toast, you could always end it with like something that leaves you on a light note, because the whole entire mood of the rest of the night, you wouldn't want to end it with like a downer. Remember your situation and your kairos. So in this case, does everybody feel like, okay, this makes some sense? Yeah, all right, cool. I am going to then go ahead and put this information up. I'll see you all next Tuesday at 8 should you want to come around for a hodgepodge of reminders. Otherwise, you can watch that quick lecture. It'll go over the evaluation sheet, some information about visual aids. But otherwise, I'll put all that detail up there. Sign up if you can, and then you email me if you need anything. Sound good? Yay! All right, y'all. Have a magical rest of the afternoon. And I think, goodbye, Kenny. And I appreciate you all so much. Have a good rest of the day and weekend. Oh, okay. Hold on. Dylan needs to say goodbye.
Bye.
Okay. Look at everybody saying bye to you.
Bye, Dylan.